Hello students, in the coming class of your market forces, we cover the term what is demand, right. So, before proceeding to the market forces, another bit is required, that is called the supply. Right now, we have to explain what is the meaning of the supply and how supply to be takes place. Thereafter, we have to explain the term like demand. We have to show here what is individual demand, market demand. Also, we explain you what is individual supply, market supply, what is the shift in supply curve and movement along the supply curves, right. But what do you mean by supply? Supply means it is that part of the total product which is available in the market at a particular price at a particular time. It is that part of the total product which is available in the market at a particular price at a particular time, and that is called the supply, right. While you explain the term supply, you have to remember the term, it is not that the whole part what the producer produces, that is called the supply. No, it is not so. It is that part of the total product what the producer produces available in the market at a particular price at a particular time, right. Now, how to explain the law? Quantity supply of a functions, quantity supply of a particular product, it is the function of its price, goal of the producers, level of technology, price of raw materials, government policies and regulations, taxes and policies and so on, and price of related commodities, the price of its substitute and price of its complement, like in case of your demand. So, the quantity supply of a terms of a particular product, let us say product X, depend upon its price, goal of the producers, technology, raw material price, price of other related commodities. Beside that, it may be government policies and so on. Lot of things are there for the supply to be affected. Now, what the law tells us? Now, other thing being constant, other thing being same, when price of a product increases, quantity supply of that also be increases. In case of your demand, there is an inverse relationship, but in case of your supply, there is a direct relationship. When price falls, supply falls. When price rise, supply rise. That the direct relationship between the price and quantity supply. But in case of a demand, what do we come across? No, they are not same, they are to be differ, right. So, that is the law of supply. So, supply means that part of your total product which is available in the market at a particular price at a particular time, that is called the supply, and the supply functions can be expressed as this quantity supply of a product X, it is a function of the price of X, your goal of the producer, level of technology, price of raw materials, price of other related commodities. And other thing being constant or remaining the same, when price rise, supply also rise, when price falls, supply falls. Now, we have to explaining this law with the help of a table what is called the supply schedule, and with the help of a curve that is called the supply curve. So, how to expressing with the help of one example. Individual supply schedule, or it will take into account individual supply, and this is the market supply. We have to express both the terms, individual supply schedule and curve, market supply schedule and curve separately. Let us say, take one example, price of the product and quantity supply of the producer A. 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. Price of the product is 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. Quantity supply is let us say 5, 10, 15, 20 and 25. That means at rupees 2, 5 units going to be supplied by the producer A, or it is available in the market the 5 units by the producer A or the suppliers A. At the 4 rupees 10 unit would be applied or available, at 6 15 unit will be available and so on. While we express it with the help of a curve, ଆମେ ତାକୁ ଗୋଟେ curve ରେ express କରିବା. On horizontal axis we take quantity, on vertical axis we take price. ଆମେ ଯଦି ଦିଟାଙ୍କ ପକେଇବା ତାହେଲେ ଆମେ କ'ଣ ଦେଖିବା ନା supply curves to be look like this. କାହିଁକି ନା 2 ରେ 5, 4 ରେ 10, 6 ରେ let us say 15, 8 रे 20 and 10 रे 25. So, obviously it is moves upward sloping. We take that I mean the alphabetically, suppose let us say the price is P1, quantity is Q1, when price rises from P1 to P2, quantity supply also rises from Q1 to Q2. That is the individual supply. Similarly, this is the individual supply schedule and this is the individual supply curve. Now, we move to the market supply schedule and market supply curve. Market means what? Now, it is the aggregation of individual. ଆମେ ଯଦି ଦୁଇଟାଙ୍କ ଟର୍ମକୁ ମିଶାଇବା, ଦୁଇଟାଙ୍କ ଟର୍ମ in the sense let us say that the two producers A and B. Let us say producer A supply this type at the corresponding prices. Now, quantity supply of B and he supply let us say 10, 15, 20, 25 and 30. Another producer, that is the producer B, they supply this type of units at the corresponding 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. Now, how to find the market supply? The market supply is nothing but the addition of individual supply. आमे कौन करिबा ना quantity supply of A और B दीटांग आमे addition करिबा. हाँ जितने आमे दीटांग आमे addition करिबा ताले आमे पाइबा कोन ना market supply. What is that? Now it is the 15, 25, 35 and it is the 45 and 55, right. So, market this particular term when you express the price with this quantity supply, that is called the market supply schedule or market supply table. Now, when you plotting this with that price, then that curve is called the market supply curve. Let us start with producer A supply is here. Now, take into account the another curve to be here. Okay, let us have to be once again have to be plotting it. Here is the price, that is the vertical axis stands for the price and the vertical horizontal axis stands for your what? The quantity. This is the supply of A, what we initially plotted. Now, we take another supply, this is the supply of B, because at a particular price, let us say assuming it, the price is to be let us say the 4. At the price 4, A supply how many units? 10 units. At the 4, B supply how many units? The 15 units, right. Now, what is the market supply corresponding to that? The market supply corresponding to be 25. So, that means like corresponding to this price, this supply and that of B, we also be plot this price with this quantity supply and that curve to be look like this supply of A plus B, which is the addition of supply of A and supply of B. While we add it together, we find the market supply is how much? The market supply is to be 25. Okay. So, at rupees 4, individual A supply 10 units, individual B supply 15 units, but they together in the market the supply 25 units. Okay. So, this is the basic idea what is called the individual supply and the market supply. Now, move to the next concept, what is called as the change in supply and change in quantity supply. Change in supply change in quantity supply, right. Let us start with this side. Quantity supply, it is a function of its price, coal of the producer, level of technology, price of other raw material, price of related commodities. We know other things being constant. Corresponding to that, this is price and this is quantity. Supply curve is here. Let us assume initially price is P1 and quantity supply is Q1. Suppose the price of the product fall, other thing being constant, when price fall, supply also be falls. When price falls from P1 to P0, supply falls from A to B, or it to be moved from Q1 to Q0, and that fall in supply is called as contraction in supply. Contraction in supply. Similarly, when price rises, let us say price increases from P1 to P2. When price increases from P1 to P2, we move from A to C, or in the other way, we move from Q1 to Q2. This rise in the supply is called as extension or expansion. Expansion in supply, right, or we move from A to C or A to B. This is called the movement along the supply curve. So, change in supply is known as movement along the supply curve, right. If you move down way, it is contraction. If you move up way, it is called the expansion. Why you move down way? We move down way because of fall in the price of the product. We move up way because of the rise in the price of the product. Okay. Now, move to change in supply. Here quantity supply, again it is a function of its price, goal of the producer, level of technology, price of raw material, price of other related commodities and so on. आमे एठी नहीं थिले कोन ए सब जिंस को आमे स्थिर करबा, this thing being constant, right, and price to be vary. बर्तन आमे कोन करबा ना प्राइस टा constant नहीं जिबा, goal change हबा, taste change हबा, preferences changes हबा, this thing going to be changes, income change हबा, like that. Now, if you plot it on the graph, because graph is the most important, table and graph are the vital in economics. Here is the price and quantity. Initially supply is here, and if you begin with the price P1 and quantity is to be Q1, we are at the point A, we are at the point A. Now, if goal increases, taste increases, preference increases, price of raw material increases, if it is increases, then what happen? The producer try to supply more. Producer try to supply more at the constant price. Therefore, he moved from A to B, or in the other way from Q1 to Q2. When he moved from Q1 to Q2, that is called as increase in supply. It's called the increase in supply, right. So, when other factors be increases, supply curve towards right. If other factor falls, supply curve shift towards left. Let us say goal, technology, price of raw material, etc. If it is to be fall, then what we find, the supply curve shift towards left. Initially it shift towards right. Right now it shift towards left from A to C, or we move from Q1 to Q0. This is called as decrease in supply. This is called the increase in supply, decrease in supply, and this side it is the expansion and contraction in supply. Okay. It is very clear idea about it. If you move along the supply curves, it is called the change in conduit supply, movement along the supply curve. If there is a shift in supply curve, then we have to consider both increase and decrease in supply. It is called the change in supply. Now, why the most important question to be arises, particularly in case of your change in supply, why there is a shift in supply curves? Why there is an increase in supply and decrease in supply? What are the main reason behind it? The main reason obviously what we cited here, price of raw material we are taking into account, that is the price of input factors we are taking into account, goal of the producer, level of technology. Let us say one by one we have to write down what are the factors responsible for the shift in supply curves. First is the input price factor responsible for shift in supply curve. First one is to be, let us say, input prices, input price. Second, technology, right. Second one is to be technology. Then we can take into account the number of seller, and also we have to take into account the expectation, the future expectation. And the goal of the producers, and large more things, price of raw material we can take into account also be, but those raw material price again it will enter into the input prices. So, these are the major factor responsible for the factor shift in supply curves. Why there is a shift in the supply curves? Okay. So, what we study in the market forces, the two things are there, demand and supply. Initially we have to explain what is demand, law of demand, individual demand schedule, market demand schedule, then change in supply, change in demand and change in quantity demand. That means movement in the demand curve and movement in the shift in the demand curve. So, second part, second force of the market is your supply. What is supply? Law of supply, then individual supply schedule, market supply schedule, individual supply curve, market supply curve, and these things, that is called the change in supply and change in quantity supply. That means the shift in supply curve and movement along the supply curves. Now, what is the term equilibriums takes place? What is the meaning of the equilibrium? Equilibrium in the sense when the two things are equal. In case of a market equilibrium, we have to considering both the sides of it, demand side and supply side. Both things to be comes together to explain the point of the market equilibrium, right. Now, I am going to be explain what is market equilibrium. Market equilibrium, right. We know when quantity demand equals to the quantity supply, we come across the two forces, demand side and the supply side. When the two sides, two forces are going to be equals to each other, that is the situation of your equilibrium. If we explain it with the help of the graph like this, quantity and the side is your price. This is the supply curve and this is that demand curve, because supply is to be upward sloping curve and demand is to be downward sloping curve. Now, both the curves are intersect at the point E, that is called the equilibrium. And what is the equilibrium quantity? This is called the equilibrium quantity QE and this is called the equilibrium price PE, right. Let us say, which is the most important factor that determine the equilibrium price? किए प्राइस को डिटरमाइन करछे हमरो डिमांड डिटरमाइन करछे ना सप्लाई डिटरमाइन करछे हु डिटरमाइन द प्राइस ऑफ द प्रोडक्ट्स किए इंपोर्टेंट फैक्टर प्राइस टा को डिटरमिनेशन करबा पई किए दरकार डिमांड दरकार कि सप्लाई दरकार सो इन टू एक्सप्लेनिंग दैट Marshall take one example he says that in order to cut a piece of paper गोटे कागज को काटिया पई हेले गोटे कॉइंची रो दीटा थिवो सीजर रो दीटा ब्लेड अछि अपर ब्लेड एंड लोअर ब्लेड in order to cut a piece of paper which blade is important हमरो अपर ब्लेड टा इंपोर्टेंट ना लोअर ब्लेड कॉइंची रे हम काटुचे कागज को जतले हम कॉइंची रे कागज टा काटुचे ऊपर ब्लेड टा इंपोर्टेंस रोची ना तळ ब्लेड टा इंपोर्टेंस रोची which plays an important role actually both the terms that both the blades are equally responsible to cut a piece of paper exactly in the same manner in order to determine the equilibrium price we have to consider both the demand and the supplies when both the forces are equal to each other that is called the equilibrium price if you take at this situation suppose when price increases what happens if the price increases obviously when the price increases demand fall initially demand is here now demand will be moved to the point A when price rise demand fall when price rise supply increases from E to let us say B and this part what you find there is a situation of your surplus of productions. These are surplus productions, excess supply. Supply is more than the demand. It is called the deficit demand or the surplus productions. Similarly, when price falls to P1 let us say, when price fall demand at this point. Now, when price falls demand increases from this to this let us say A to C. That means, when price falls demand increases and when price falls supply falls. Supply falls from this line it will be E to D and this is called as the deficit in the supply. This is the deficit means demand is less excess demand. This is the deficit supply, supply means it is the excess demand. Demand is much more than the supply, but in the previous case supply is much more than the demand. These are the two disequilibrium situations. Now, how the equilibrium will be takes place? In which way we have to bring them to be equal to each other? If there is a supply situation, we have to lower down the price. If there is a deficit situation, we have to raising the price of it. How the equilibrium to express in the coming class I will be explaining the whole part with the help of the table as well as the diagram of it and how the shift in demand and shift in supply and both plays the important or the crucial role to determine the equilibrium price. I will be explaining whole part in the coming class. Okay. So, that is for all for today. So, in the today we have to explain what are the market forces demand and supply, what is the basic concept of the demand and how the demand curve to be traced, law of demand, similarly the supply, law of supply and so how the supply curve to be traced. Then when both are to be equal to each other, when they are to be intersect each other, how the equilibrium price to be calculated. In the coming class, we have to move details about the equilibrium price further. Thank you for